Pocahontas. Yes. A very misguided Disney movie. There was certainly potential that it had to be something great, but it seems that the vast majority of people, including myself, have come to the agreement that it is not, in fact, great. There are some people out there who think it is, in fact, a terrible movie, and while I'm not quite that harsh, it certainly doesn't live up to what it could have been. But that's not actually the main point of this video. Well, it's part of the main point, but you see, this video is more actually about Pocahontas 2, the oft-forgotten and maligned sequel to Pocahontas, which I think is superior in virtually every single way. Now, what do I mean by that, you might be asking? Well, we have to basically go through every way that I think that it is superior to actually see how it does things better and why it doesn't really deserve to be maligned like some of the other Disney sequels. I think, rather, that it's probably one of the better Disney sequels they ever made, especially because it improves so much upon the original movie. Anyway, let's get into Category 1. As a main character, Pocahontas is not very interesting in the first movie. This is something I also brought up in my Disney Princess ranking video, and part of the reason why Pocahontas didn't do too well in that video. Like, Pocahontas herself is just kind of boring in the first movie. She has very few character traits that you can actually latch onto or find particularly interesting. She kind of feels just a little bit like a blank slate. As you can see, I'm already struggling to really describe anything about her personality. And even as a character, she doesn't really have much of a motive. Her only motive is not to just be whatever her father wants her to be and take a slightly more adventurous route through life. That doesn't really go anywhere in the movie. The themes of the original Pocahontas are a little bit confused and not very clear, other than racism equal bad. Which is a very basic, not very in-depth theme, but, I guess there's nothing technically wrong with it, other than the fact that it's a little bit black and white, and also Ratcliffe's the only real villain, which is something the second movie does a better job at, making the situation a bit more nuanced. Anyway, speaking of the second movie, Pocahontas herself is a lot more interesting in this movie. Her personality isn't, super improved per se, but her role in the story is a lot better, to the point where she actually has opportunities to, do something interesting. Basically, what I'm saying is she's challenged a lot more in the second movie on a personal level. I think it helps a lot that she's taken out of her element near the start of the movie when she, goes to England and London, because then she becomes effectively the only major Native American character, since, Utamaramokan is basically mostly there for comic relief, and he doesn't say anything, so, that's another factor. The main theme with Pocahontas in Pocahontas 2, though, is a lot clearer than the first movie, because in this movie, you genuinely care a lot more about her because of the fact that she's in a situation where she believes that John Smith is dead, and that she doesn't quite fit in with everyone else because of just how much of a connection that she had with the settlers, such as John Smith. But it puts her in an interesting perspective because now she's caught between two different worlds. The world of the settlers and England, and the world of her own people, the Powhatan tribe. And the arc that Pocahontas goes through in this movie is basically her figuring out who she really is and what her place is, being in that intermediate position between these two different peoples. While she is fiercely loyal to her original tribe, she feels the pressure of the outside world to change who she is to fit in with them. And the theme is basically her realizing that she doesn't need to change herself to fit in with them, and that she needs to let go of this connection that she feels to John Smith and the outside world, and realize that who she really is her origin as part of the Powhatan tribe, and she and her people don't need to change themselves to fit in with the rest of the world. And I love her song at the beginning of the movie, Where Do I Go From Here? Which is probably one of my favorite Disney songs of all time because it's really good at actually expressing a character's inner feelings, and it does a way better job of making us care about Pocahontas as a character than anything in the first movie did.
In my heart, I don't feel part of so much I've known.
But I especially love the reprise at the end of the movie, where she does ultimately come to a decision regarding where she should go from there.
There's nothing to lose, nothing to fear. The past is gone. I must move on from here.
And her ultimate decision is basically that she realizes that she needs to move on from her own personal feelings and be the leader that she was always supposed to be. And that she needs to be bold in who she is as herself and not who other people want her to be in order to achieve that. Which I think is not only a more interesting theme and message than the first movie, but it's executed a lot better here, in my opinion, than the themes of the first movie were. And also, since John Smith basically disappears at the start of this movie, we are with John Rolfe for the majority of the runtime. And if you see my Disney Prince video, you already know that I like John Rolfe better than John Smith. And I think that his romance and relationship with Pocahontas is better developed than that one was, especially because they cut the most meaningful romantic scene from the original Pocahontas anyway. You know, the If I Never Knew You song that was too boring for test audiences, or some other nonsense. I like John Rolfe. I think he's got a decently charming personality. And what's funny is, even though John Smith is gone for a while, as soon as he shows up again, he has surprisingly good chemistry with John Rolfe. Like, the interactions between these two are pretty great.
I'll take care of it. Pardon me. Oh, very stylish.
And, you know, just to repeat myself a little bit from the Prince ranking, I like that when it comes to the romance with John Rolfe and Pocahontas, it's not just love at first sight. It takes them both a little while to, come to terms with each other and actually fall in love. Like, obviously the events of the movie happen over the course of not a very long period of time, but, I mean, the original Pocahontas practically implies that she loves John Smith, like, after the first couple scenes, which is even more rushed than you could possibly say for this movie. So either way, it works better, even if it's not by any means the best romance in any Disney movie. Plus, it's actually historically accurate, unlike John Smith anyway. More important than John Rolfe, though, is actually, our good friend Ratcliffe, the villain. You see, Ratcliffe is, well, not a very good villain in the original Pocahontas. He's basically just, I want gold because I'm the bad guy, and I will make other people into my slaves to do so. And also, I will not believe anything anyone says beyond reason because evil. Like, he's not the worst Disney villain ever. The performance by David Ogden Stiers is good enough to make him at least watchable. Plus, he does have a couple funny lines, I will admit.
When King James sees the gold these peasants unearth, success will be mine at last. They don't want to feed us, your ninnies? Wiggins, why do you think those insolent heathens attacked us?
Because we invaded their land and cut down their trees and dug up their earth.
But honestly, I will say that Ratcliffe is probably the single most improved character from Pocahontas 1 to Pocahontas 2, because I think he's actually a genuinely pretty good villain in Pocahontas 2. It helps that he's not just trying to get gold at any cost and refusing to listen to reason, but rather that his main mission in this movie is vengeance. He wants to wipe out the Native Americans, not just entirely because he still thinks there's gold, but because he's so upset at them after all the trouble they caused him. And of course he especially hates Pocahontas, who's basically the main catalyst, and the one thing preventing him from possibly getting away with his plans. He's much more manipulative and deceptive, and honestly a bit creepy in this movie, none of which really came off in the first movie, at least not as they intended it to. Plus, it helps that, he actually interacts with the main character in this movie, because I don't know if you noticed, but Pocahontas and Ratcliffe literally never have a proper interaction in the original movie. Their only connection is via both interacting with John Smith. Like, Ratcliffe sees Pocahontas from far away and claims that what she's saying is a trick, but he's not directly interacting with her in that scene. Meanwhile, in this movie, the both of them have multiple interactions, which honestly helps create an actual real dynamic between the hero and the villain. Ratcliffe is also just a much more effective villain in this movie. In the original, the tension of that movie barely increases until the very end, so from the moment Ratcliffe shows up, he doesn't really do anything particularly menacing or villainous until he suddenly decides to stop listening to reason and march against the Native Americans. But here, he's constantly plotting and making progress towards his goals, primarily by trying to convince the king that Pocahontas is not worth listening to and that he should go through with his plan instead of changing it. And also, Ratcliffe has already been very effective before the movie even starts. I think it's actually pretty telling that Ratcliffe, near the end of the original Pocahontas, after everyone turns on him, says that he'll have them all hanged for this.
I see you all hang for this!
And it's worth noting that by the time Pocahontas 2 starts, we don't see from any of that original crew ever again except John Smith, who Ratcliffe thinks he's taking care of in the opening scene of the movie. To me, this implies that Ratcliffe has already gotten rid of the others, whether by murdering them or actually having them hanged like he said he would. In his original song in the first movie, he claims that King James is his good friend.
My dear friend King Jimmy!
Which would actually make a lot of sense in a way, that he put him in that position in the first movie to go on the voyage despite the fact that the other nobles and politicians didn't really like him, because he was hoping, being his friend and all, that he could redeem himself and his reputation.
Yes, all that talk about being a pathetic social climber who's failed at everything he's
I'm
tried.
very well aware that this is my last chance for glory.
But of course, Ratcliffe knew that after everything went wrong, he was doomed, so he had to come up with this crazy story that everyone else was the real villains and he is the one who was betrayed rather than the other way around. And he only gets away with it because King James is already inclined to believe him because he has a certain liking towards Ratcliffe, which is starting to become shaky though as he realizes that he's pushing the limits, especially with not being successful in bringing John Smith to confirm his story. You know, there's really a surprising amount of depth here that it's just non-existent in the original Pocahontas. And have I mentioned Ratcliffe's villain song too? Which is perhaps my favorite moment from him in this movie, and I think it's a lot more effective of a villain song than his first one, which is just him bragging about how rich he'll be, basically. Whereas this time, he's deliberately using the song as a way to trick King James into thinking that Pocahontas is actually a villain in disguise by making him question everything he sees. And it's really juicy with the irony too, because of course that's what Ratcliffe is, but he's trying to convince King James that that is what Pocahontas is, and he sets up a situation that will make it appear that Pocahontas really is pretending to be something she isn't.
Only one thing's really clear. Things are not what they appear.
The best part is that, in a sense, Pocahontas is pretending to be something she isn't, and that does get her into trouble. And she later realizes this before coming back to the king and risking her life at the end. So if you really think about it, Ratcliffe is completely right. Pocahontas was mistakenly trying to be something that she wasn't, to try and prove that her people are civilized, when really they don't need to change who they are. And Ratcliffe is also right about himself, even though he doesn't realize he's secretly allowing the king to see through his disguise in his desperate effort to convince him that Pocahontas is the real villain. Like I said, there's actual layers to Pocahontas 2 that are just not there in the original Pocahontas. Oh, and Ratcliffe has like an actual climactic final battle in this movie, whereas in the original he just fires one shot and then gets taken out. Like, it feels like the original is building up to a really dramatic climax and then it just kind of ends on a bit of a whimper. Whereas there's a full-fledged sea battle and you've got John Smith and John Rolfe sword fighting. Ratcliffe tries to directly murder Pocahontas. And I love how after they stop him and throw him into the ocean at the end, that John Smith has that little line mirroring Ratcliffe's at the beginning of the movie.
Pity. I so would have preferred to see you hanged.
Pity. I so would have preferred to see you hang.
Makes it extra satisfying. And it all leads to my favorite quote from the entire movie, when Ratcliffe attempts to try and explain to King James what happened, but it is a futile effort.
No more lies.
You've lost everything you lied so hard to achieve.
Oh, also, Jim Cummings is great as King James in this movie, but I mean, he's always good in like everything he's in, so is that even really notable?
Speaking of other side characters too, I mentioned Udamanamakin once or twice, and he is honestly a really great comedic side character. He's all purely show, don't tell, because he never talks. The bit about him putting a notch in the stick for every white man that he sees to determine how powerful their forces are, only for him to put so many notches in it that it just becomes a twig, is honestly a really funny joke. And it's entirely visual. Like, if you were just listening to the movie in the background, you would completely miss it. Like, he's probably my favorite character in the whole movie. And you know he's iconic because he even puts a purple hat on at one point. And only iconic characters wear purple hats. Now, I'm not really much of a big fan of the animal side characters in the original Pocahontas, and they're not exactly spectacular in Pocahontas 2 either, but in the original, they have these really long, drawn-out sequences that are like a little bit overplayed jokes that go on for a bit too long. Like, it's just like the movie pauses so they can do a bit with the animals because they didn't know how else to fill the runtime or something. But thankfully in this movie, most of the animal jokes are just kind of quick things thrown in here and there. But while nothing special, it doesn't feel like they're deliberately pausing the movie just to go on and on with these animals for an extended period of time for some reason. And they just work a lot better here, even though there's still nothing special.
Now, neither Pocahontas movie is perfectly historically accurate. Let me just say that right off the bat. But there is a significant gap in historicity, I believe, between Pocahontas 1 and 2. Whereas Pocahontas 2 actually does get multiple historical facts semi-correct at least, if not fairly accurate generally. Pocahontas 1 basically almost completely misses the mark on just about everything. Like, Pocahontas 1 is basically just historical fan fiction. Like, in the real story of Pocahontas, not only was she much younger, and there was no romance between her and John Smith, since he was basically her brother, more or less. It's complicated.
But I'll always love you. Like a brother. I wouldn't want it any other way.
I believe he was adopted by the Native American chief, who was Pocahontas' father. But, like, the events of the movie don't even match the events of the drama going on at the time. Like, there were kidnappings and such. And, honestly, a lot of really interesting things that probably would have made for a more interesting movie than what we actually ended up with. Also, in terms of historicity, the fact that this movie essentially portrays all of the European settlers as basically being completely good guys who were just being manipulated by the evil Ratcliffe is not only pretty boring, but it's not exactly very realistic either, since it basically takes away their ability to actually choose for themselves what they think, and they're just being pulled along by Ratcliffe the whole time. So if they did anything bad, oh, it was just Ratcliffe's fault. So there's no, like, personal responsibility for any of these guys. Except, of course, John Smith, but he was always good in the first place, so, you know, not like that really matters that much. But meanwhile, in Pocahontas 2, well, obviously, they've thrown in some extra drama in the third act because, you know, there has to be a third act. And Pocahontas' child, who should have been born by this point, is not there because they have to follow on from the first movie, which obviously didn't set any of that stuff up because they decided that Kocoum never actually married Pocahontas, which he did in real life, and that he dies instead. So, yeah, it's not really Pocahontas 2's fault for not being able to follow that, obviously. But Pocahontas 2 is actually, you know, accurate in the way that it portrays her having a romance with John Rolfe, who she actually did love, unlike John Smith, who was just her friend/brother. And Pocahontas did actually go to Europe, and she did actually meet with the king. Like I said, the drama with Ratcliffe is added in. That never happened in real life. But I'm more willing to accept additions like that, since she does still end on good terms with the king by the end of the movie. That's more of a bending history rather than breaking it kind of situation for me personally.
I'm not exactly breaking the laws of time, but I am bending them a little.
And this is still a fictional movie at the end of the day. It's not like the historical problems with Pocahontas 1 are the main reason why I think that it is not the best movie.
And, you know, all in all, the only thing in this movie I can really think of that's, like, noticeably worse, I guess you could say, than the original, is the animation. But, I mean, come on, we're comparing a secondary animation studio to Walt Disney Animation Studios during the Disney Renaissance, so of course it's not going to look as good. But even that being said, it actually still looks pretty good. Like, I mean, this is better than most TV animation, let's be honest. So I don't really consider it much of a downside to the movie per se. It's just one of those situations where obviously if you start comparing the two, it's not going to look as good, especially when you have a sequence as beautiful as Colors of the Wind in the original movie. And also the London Town song and the Wait Till He Sees You song are both pretty mediocre or whatever songs. I don't think either of them are bad, but they're certainly not standouts. Not in the same way that Where Do I Go From Here is, which alone just about makes up for the other two, but yeah. You could call the soundtrack a mixed bag in that sense, I guess. But like I said, I don't think any of the songs are bad, but only one of them is truly great. But like, other than that, there's not much I can think of that's terribly bad about this movie, so I don't understand the hate. Apparently I've seen some people who don't like it just because they didn't continue the John Smith and Pocahontas romance, even though it was completely ahistorical in the first place. So all I'm saying is I could never really get on board with that criticism because I prefer the John Rolfe romance because it's both more historical and better developed. Oh well, some people and their ships, they'll never be happy if you interrupt their pairings, no matter how logical they are. And that about does it. That is my opinions on both Pocahontas and Pocahontas 2, and why I think Pocahontas 2 is way better than Pocahontas 1. Well, if I can convince at least 5 people in the comment section to agree with me, then this was worth the effort. Now seems like a good time to bring up my patrons. Those extra iconic individuals who go one step further in supporting me on my Patreon page, which you can join for free or paid. Paid members get access to everything, but free members do get access to see every third special release early preview video that I upload for ranking videos that I'm currently in the process of making. So feel free to join my Patreon even as a free subscriber to check out early content, and for as low as just $1 a month you can get access to everything. And also thank you to my YouTube channel members who help support me as well, and they get access to loyalty badges and special emojis. And for as little as just $1 to $2 a month as well. Well, if you're interested in seeing any of my other content, then you could click this playlist over here to see all the videos I've done on every Walt Disney Animation Studios movie, or you could click this playlist to see every video I've done on any of the sequel movies that Disney made to their Walt Disney Animation Studios movies, since this video is about both of those, basically. Anyway, most importantly of all, always remember to be iconic.